Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming today, both here in person and virtually. I've had a tough year. I'm sure many of you have had a tough year. Tough 2 years now. It's really been a crazy world. This last hurricane, to me, kind of proved that, where the Mississippi reversed directions and decided, you know what, if everything else is kind of in disarray, why not turn around and go the wrong way? To me, that kind of showed me something, that everything can flip on its head and say, we're not in control. I looked at that and I said, wow. I come in here almost every day. I come into different locations that take care of different families regularly, dealing with the ultimate demise. And I accept these things that happen. I remember my father that passed away, my mother-in-law, my grandparents. And at times I become upset. And I remember them. And I remember the good times. And I try and remember with my children and my wife and my brothers and my mother and my father-in-law. And through sickness and in health and different times. But sometimes it's tougher. Sometimes it's easier. I do find when we come together as a community, it makes it a little bit easier. I don't know what easier actually means, because it's still tough. It still doesn't make sense. When it's a beautiful day with the sun shining on us, not like years we've had in the past where it's raining, I think it's a little nicer. When the temperature is perfect and the wind is blowing and the leaves are starting to change and the grass is cut, it's a little bit nicer. So today, to sit here with all of you, virtually, in person, with or without masks, trying to get through this pandemic, this craziness, I thank you for sitting here with me, joining with me and remembering those that we've lost. I now introduce Rabbi Levy, a friend of mine, a rabbi of mine, someone who I've learned with, to help us to bring out some emotion, to bring out some memories, and to be here, to be in the present. Rabbi Levy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand here today as an orphan, as some of you are as well. I stand here thinking of my own parents, who died just about 5 years ago, within 6 weeks of each other. So I'm speaking to myself and inviting you to listen. I'd like to listen to the 6 things I think I have to say. Not one of the 6 things is, I'm looking for the manager. Mr. Levine and I did not practice. I'm looking for the manager. I'm looking for who's in charge. I'd like to complain. I'd like things fixed. He mentioned some of them. The hurricanes, the pandemics, the people who were taken from us. I'd like to know what's going on. My 6-year-old grandson and I were talking about perhaps writing a book together. And he said, why don't we write a book with the title, Why is the Sky Blue? You probably have a precocious grandchild somewhere along the way too. So I said, what will we answer? He thinks for a second, and he says, because that's what Hashem decided. That's what God decided. And I'm okay not having an answer to the unanswered questions. I may have mentioned here previously that there's a company that advertised that they had the answers. They said, you have questions, we have answers. Radio Shack is in chapter 11, or maybe it doesn't exist anymore. Because anybody who has all the answers, or thinks they have all the answers, I don't know how they maintain presence in this world. I think that personally we go through trauma, difficulty, hardship. There are a few moments of happiness mixed in, hopefully more than a few. As a nation, as citizens, we also feel that difficulty and that pain. Yesterday marked 20 years, 2 decades, of the tragedy of 9/11. Let's leave all that for a moment, and let's get personal and selfish. I have 6 things to say, and I'm letting you know that because I'm in education long enough to know that people will take away something that rings with them. And you can take one thing and not the other thing. There's a fascinating rule that comes from the Medrash in the Torah reading of this week's Parsha. The Parsha was Vayelech, begins the last speech that Moshe gave to the people before he departed. We say that a person should live to 120 because that's how long Moses, our teacher, lived. So the Medrash comments and says, we're talking about death and departing the world. There's a rule that a person who is between the death and the burial is not required to perform any mitzvot that are positive. Don't have to daven, don't have to put on tefillin, don't have to bench. You can't do the things you're not supposed to do, but the things that you're supposed to do, you don't have to do. Why is that? So the Talmud explains that when meto mutal lifanav, when the deceased is in front of us, we're supposed to be present and only think of taking care of them. Even if they had such an enterprise as Levine's in those days. The family and the close relatives were present. That's all they could think of. How are we going to take care of the deceased in a proper way? Fascinating concept. To be present in a world that it's hard to be present. I might be the only person here who remembers what it was like before cell phones. Wasn't it really calmer? Wasn't it really easier to be present? Whatever accidents there were, God forbid, on the road, they were not because people were texting or talking or doing things with their phones. So maybe today is about being present too. Adam asked me to turn my phone off. I want you to know I left it in the car. Because if it's in my pocket, I know it's there. I'm waiting to see what's going to happen. and I wanted to be present with you today. So I'm going to say a few things that remind us of the people who we are mourning and thinking about, who we came to visit, and that visit means a lot, and how we can take some things from the visit, from the thinking of them, that can actually make us better people. That's good for us, and it's certainly good for the people for whom we mourn today. I'd like to invite us, number two, to think of a construct of not remembering the people years and years and years ago. I'd like to go from now, or from the time that they departed, back a few years, whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. Let us remember those moments, those events, those vignettes that stay with us. In my case, I'll share with you, we took care of my parents as best as we could. As best as we could. But that was a short period of time. They spent time taking care of us for many more years than we took care of them. And let's just look at that dynamic, how things switch. We did what we were supposed to do. We did what was honorable. We did the best that we could. And let's remember them, how they were in those moments. And then let's go back a couple of years to the good times and the times that were sad, the ups and the downs, how they acted, what we learned from them, what did they stand for, what was important to them. Nobody goes back to look for an Apple II GS computer. Some people are saying, what is that? It's one of the first computers there was. Because in technology and in life we go forward. We're looking for the next advancement. After electric cars, there'll be something else. When it comes to human beings, we do look back. We look at the people who founded our country. We look at the people who wrote the Constitution with all their warts and flaws. We look at them and we say, something about them. And today we look at the people who we hold dear. Parents, siblings, children. Thirdly, we can reflect on a letter that was written 700 years ago. Nachmanides wrote a letter to his son before he passed away. Some of us would think of how to play the market. Some of us would talk about how to keep the estate afloat. Nachmanides wrote, I want to tell you how to live a good life. Stay calm. Run away from anger. Be humble. And he said, read this letter once a week. If you read this letter once a week, your life will be different. Your relationship with others will be different. Your relationship with God will be different. How many of us think of writing our children letters? I'm inviting you to write your children letters. I'm inviting you to take a pen and a paper and put your thoughts down. I'm inviting you to enjoy technology as much as it takes you, but not to forget the old ways and the ways of the people we came from, who seem to have a pretty good way to figure much of life out. What would you say to your children? If if you could write them a letter about how to be successful in life. Point number 4 is, how are we going to let the next generation know where we came from? We have an aunt who's 100 years old. She doesn't have her full faculties, but sometimes she's right on the spot. 10 years ago, she wrote an autobiography about her life. We were just leafing through it a few days ago. How many of our children know who their grandparents were? Who they really were? How many people know about their great-grandparents? Sometimes they came across from other shores. How are we going to let the people know who we are? What type of vehicles are we going to use to make sure that somebody knows where they came from and our part in their lives? Not everybody has a name on a building. Not everybody is able to do things that the public knows. The prophet said, walk humbly. Doesn't mean that if your name is somewhere it isn't good. It means that a lot of people do a lot of things that don't get any press. It's a lady in Philadelphia who called up the caterers a few days ago as the Afghan refugees were coming in. She called up 6 restaurants and she says, we have 200 people coming in. And we need to make culturally sensitive meals. Think of that. Like kosher meals we have to make for them. Because these people are coming through a trauma and they're coming to Philadelphia, we're going to host them. She happened to interview on the radio, so I know her name. How's her family going to know that? She took an action. She rolled up her sleeves for others, people she didn't know. It just made me think for a second. Our ancestors who came across, was anybody waiting for them? How wonderful our world is now. Our ancestors who came from the other side, was anybody waiting for them? With a meal? No, they had a little piece of paper. They had no cell phones. Often there were no telephones. They had a little piece of paper. Get from Ellis Island to Savannah, Georgia somehow. Get from Ellis Island to downtown New York. Person didn't speak a word of English. Had a few probably foreign coins in their pocket. And somehow they got to the place that they were supposed to get to. It's wonderful that we have the ability to take care of these people. Are her kids going to know what she did? Are her grandchildren going to know? Not in a haughty way, but in a way to know this. Let people know what you do that's good. That's how we follow. We follow by example. And now it's up to us to make the example for somebody else. In the merit of the deceased. Memory is a two-edged sword. Too much of the wrong memory makes us uncomfortable. Enough of the right memory is soothing. And that is perhaps why the Yizkor prayer is said on the synagogue at the major holidays like Yom Kippur. Because the awesomeness and seriousness of the day is soothed when we remember where we came from. As Mr. Levine said, we have no clue where we're going. Absolutely no clue. But we can know where we came from, who we came from, and we can know who they were and retrieve those memories and put them right in front of us. Be present with them right here, this here moment. And perhaps tomorrow, For my father, it was one of the 613 commandments not to pay too much for gas. He would drive 10 miles to get it to buy gas that was cheaper. He could not conceive of buying something like Exxon, a name brand. Just couldn't conceive of it. He once told us proudly that he traveled up the eastern coast of the United States. He saw gasoline for 29 cents. I'm sorry, 19 cents. 19 cents. And he went to a hardware store and he bought containers and he filled his truck up. As he's driving, he's saying to himself, you know, you fool. You could get blown up in a second if somebody hits you. So he passed that, a little bit of that Michigas to me, but I want to tell you, I bought gas at Exxon. Don't tell anybody. And BP. Not only the no-name brands on Route 73 in New Jersey. But along with that Michigas was a lot of other good stuff to remember. And he got around somehow without Waze and with Google. He had maps, a map of every state on the eastern part of the United States. Well, what story do you have that's like that? Each of us carries those stories with us. And sometimes they're stories we don't really want to remember. Things we didn't particularly like. So let's not do it to our kids. Let's make sure we stop the madness. If you're sitting here today, if you're watching today, it means you want to connect. And it's interesting that the Kaddish prayer that we're going to say in a moment says nothing about death. It says nothing about mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. It says nothing about sadness. The key theme is, may God's name be great. Because there's a bracha that we make when we hear a person dies. The blessing is, blessed is the true judge. Because we don't know why the manager does what he does. When I hear on the news that X number of children were died in a certain accident, I say to myself, why are they only talking about the children? The mothers, the fathers, the grandparents. Of course a child's life is precious, and so is everybody else's. So let's make a blessing out of the death. Let's hold on to those things and stay present with them. Our computer is going to be new next year. Our Torah, our synagogue, our mitzvot, the lineage that we come from stays right where it is. That's the yesterday we hold on to. And that's the yesterday that has served our people for the thousands of years we have been on this earth. And you stand as a representative of your family. You stand as the next link in the chain. It's a real chain. It's a real link. And it's such a valuable heritage. Something we can hold on to. Think about it. The whole world's upset with us. Doesn't matter what's going on. Israel's always on the front page of the paper. What they're doing in Israel, everybody's upset about. They're right, they're wrong. I'm not going there. We are somebody, we've come from somebody, and we hope that when they let go of us, whoever the they is, they'll do it the way you did it. Figuratively or actually holding their hands, being with them every second, no day, no night, no expense, no difficulty, ready to give. I invite you to stand if you're feeling comfortable to do so. We're going to say the Kel Mole prayer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop. And when I stop, you insert the name of the deceased that you are here to remember. If you don't know the Hebrew name, say the English name. The person and the name of their parents. I'll say it first in Hebrew and then I'll say it in English. Hail Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachas Kanfei Ashchina, B'malos Kedoshim Etorim, Kezohar Horoki Amazirim, Es Nishmas, Shelchu li olamon, bavur shenadvu tzedaka bad haskaras nishmason, began eden te menuchasam, lachein bal harachabim yastir v'seisher kanavav li olamim, yitzror b'tzrach hayim es nishmaso, nishmason Adonai yunachalason. Yinoach b'shalom al mishkavoseihem, Yinomar Amen. O God full of compassion, you who dwell on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of your presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of who has gone into eternity. Lord of mercy, bring them under the cover of your wings. Let the souls be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou their possession, and may their repose be in peace. The English leaves out the fact that it is meritorious for the deceased for us to give to charity in their names, and also whatever we study in their memory also is a tremendous merit. The last thing I want to leave you with, to sum up everything we said, King Solomon said that it is better to go to a place where there is mourning and remembrance than to a party. Is that just a negative attitude? What is that? Because in fact, when you leave a party, you don't always leave happy. Go out to have a good time, it doesn't always end up to be a good time. When you come to a place like this, when you send someone on their final departure, you know that you're doing the right thing, and you know that you're doing the good thing and something that is eternal. We'll say Psalm 23 together, then we'll say Kaddish, and we'll visit the graves that we came to see. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of the death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. As we approach the awesome day of Yom HaKippurim, let us take some of these ideas with us as we go to the synagogue. Let us ask ourselves, where do we stand with God? whatever's happened, there's so much that we can be thankful for. What's our side of the accounting? And there's anything we can take from our forefathers and foremothers that would help in that situation. Help us see life the way it should be seen. Help us have the attitudes and values and practices that are wholesome and good. Let's join together and say the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah. B'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach li'olam u'li'olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei d'kudusha berichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata tamiran b'yalma v'imru Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu el kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. I want to leave you with one last thought. There is a custom that some people have that when they conclude the morning, the Shiva period, actually pour a drink. They pour l'chaim. Why is that? Now's when they're drinking? They just finished with the Shiva? What's that about? It's a custom, it's not a rule. Because they want to show that they're making a bracha. They're making a bracha over that 22-year-old scotch. And the bracha is to say, God, I know that whatever you did, you had a reason. I don't always understand the manager, but I know the manager's there. I'm going to make a blessing and say, God, I know we're in your hands. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take that being in God's shadow, being in God's hands, and being in the shadow of the people who we think about today, and take that for a whole year so that when we join again at Levine's in Jerusalem next year, we'll be able to say that we did something, we thought something, we acted something that made a difference for us and the people in our close and dear circle. May you be blessed with a year that is filled with every well-being. Thank you.
As Rabbi spoke, I had in my mind that I was going to ask all of you to take a minute to close your eyes and think of a good thought. But I sat there and I did that myself. So I'm just going to share with you my thought about my father. My father he was a funny guy. Being in this industry, it's tough to think of my father as a funny guy. But there's a picture that I have of him taking a piece of cake, and he had this face on him as he took this piece of cake, and he was a diabetic, so he shouldn't have been taking a piece of cake, and he had this face on him as he was sneaking this piece of cake, and somebody snuck a picture of him sneaking that piece of cake, and it's a picture that will last with me for as long as it'll last with me. So I share that moment with you. So for all of you that at your own time, you can take that moment to close your eyes and to remember that, and remember whatever moment you wish to take by yourselves collectively as you wish. But I thank you all for coming here virtually and in person and joining with me today and for me to share that with you. Thank you all again.